Undeclared wars are commonplace. Tragically, our government engages in preemptive war, otherwise known as aggression, with no complaints from the American people. Sadly, we have become accustomed to living with the illegitimate use of force by government. To develop a truly free society, the issue of initiating force must be understood and rejected.
What if sometimes, to love your country, you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if it is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now?
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, February 9th, 2026. We have a new guest for you today, Ben Freeman from the Quincy Institute. Ben is a Ph.D. from Texas A&M in political science. He's an expert on military spending and has written a terrific book, which I commend to anybody who wants to understand where your money is going and how dangerous it can be. We also have a wonderful mutual friend in former professor, former Colonel Andrew Basovich. Ben, welcome here, my dear friend. Thank you for sharing your time and your knowledge with us. How, big picture now, before we get granular, how dangerous for peace abroad and at home is the military-industrial complex that we have in the U.S. today?
It's enormous. But before I get into it, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate your show and appreciate your work too.
Thank you.
To your question, I think when we're talking about the dangers of the military-industrial complex, you got to talk about two big things right off the bat. And of course, the one thing folks want to talk about right away is the money. And make no mistake, we got $1 trillion defense budget for the first time ever. There's talks of taking it up to $1.5 trillion. That money is coming out of your pockets if you're an American taxpayer. So, that's an enormous deal right there. But the number two thing you need to think about when you think about the military-industrial complex is all the wars that it's getting us into. If you're spending that kind of money, you have to have enemies abroad. We have to have somebody to fight. If the world looks really peaceful and everybody's nice and hunky-dory, well, then Americans aren't going to pay for a $1.5 trillion military budget. So the big danger with the military-industrial complex, I think, and we argue in the book, is that you get this unrestrained U.S. foreign policy that as the Quincy Institute's namesake, President John Quincy Adams said, this system takes us abroad in search of monsters to destroy.
A mutual friend of ours with whose work and career you might be familiar, Ambassador Chaz Freeman, has extended that with a great one-liner saying the problem with searching for monsters abroad at home is that they have a way of following you. The problem with searching for monsters abroad is that they have a way of following you home, like on 9/11. Well, the problem with the military-industrial complex is probably even more insidious than you've described because of the influence, the iron grip that it has on members of Congress. I mean, it's virtually a guaranteed flow of cash, whether we're in war or not. I realize it's an incentive for war, but I mean, can you even get your hands around $1.5 trillion? What would they possibly do with $1.5 trillion?
They don't know, is the honest to goodness answer. And you talk to serious folks around town, around DC, and regardless, from the left or the right, you talk to anybody who's really looking at this, and they don't really know where this money's going to go. And so the simple answer to, this sort of just insane, a 50% military spending plus up, the simple answer to the question of where is it going to go is to waste. It's going to go to crony capitalism. You're going to get what's effectively corporate subsidies to a lot of these defense contractors. They're going to produce some of the same wasteful systems that we've been seeing for decades now, like the F-35, the littoral combat ship, which the Navy calls the little crappy ship. You're going to get more and more programs like that. So, the more money you have, money doesn't create efficiencies. It creates waste. So there's a real danger here if we try to raise the defense budget as quickly as this.
We have a president and we have a secretary of defense. He calls himself the secretary of war, who seem to be of the view that more money will make us safer and that will keep us freer. Your argument is quite the opposite. Your argument is that more money in the hands of civilian management over military, absolutely subject to the civilian management, no matter what they ask them to do, is going to produce wars. I mean, what national security threat did the country of Venezuela pose in the United States that we had to invade it in the middle of the night and kidnap the president out of his bedroom?
None that I'm aware of. I live and work from the great state of Florida. And, when you talk about the drug flows coming into the state of Florida, they're talking about, Venezuela being this great drug exporter. We're just not seeing it. The drugs that come into the U.S. largely coming across the border with Mexico. So, you're going to invade a country, it's weird to go after Venezuela, not Mexico. Not that I'm encouraging the administration to go after Mexico, mind you. But, if that's your trumped up, justification, even that one just seems weak on the surface of it. But I think the only saving grace we have with what happened with Venezuela is at least the administration had the foresight to not go in, put boots on the ground and start another forever war there. As unfortunate as it was, at least we don't have U.S. troops on foreign soil right now.
What national security threat does Iran pose to the United States?
Same thing. Next to nothing. I mean, you're talking about, when you're talking about Iran, if you're really honest about what the U.S. is doing in relation with Iran, it's not about nuclear weapons. It's about the U.S. defending Israel, and it's about Israel calling it its big bad best friend in to protect it. And so, when you're looking at U.S. foreign policy when it comes to Iran, you got to ask yourself: are we talking about an America first foreign policy? Are we talking about an Israel first foreign policy? Because the U.S. interest, the U.S. threat from Iran is negligible to non-existent.
Wow. And yet Benjamin Netanyahu is coming to Washington on Wednesday. The Israeli press says his arrival and his message are urgent, and he's probably going to ask the president of the United States, who will no doubt comply, to institute some sort of an attack on Iran, notwithstanding the likely Iranian response and the consequences to Israel.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing: if Netanyahu thinks it's in Israel's national security interest to attack Iran, then they should do it. They have extraordinary capabilities. The U.S. gives the Israeli military billions of dollars in weapons every single year. We sell them even more than that. We give them our most advanced technology. They have what's called a qualitative military edge in the Middle East. They have a stronger military than anybody in the region. So, if they want to attack Iran, they have the capability to do it. They can do it themselves. You don't need to put the U.S. or U.S. service members in harm's way to do it. And I think, frankly, with Netanyahu, we heard during the last U.S. airstrikes on Iran that, according to the president, that we had decimated Iran's nuclear program. So if you believe that, then again, you got to go back to what's in it for the U.S. to bomb Iran again. I just don't see the national security threat to the U.S. from Iran.
Chris, play the NBC clip where the anchor and Trump are standing in a room and he's asking him if the Ayatollah should be afraid when he goes to bed at night.
Should the supreme leader in Iran be worried right now?
I would say he should be very worried, yeah, he should be. As you know, they're negotiating with us.
I know they are, but the protesters have said, where are the Americans? You promised them we would have their back. Do we still have their back?
Well, we've had their back. And look, that country's a mess right now because of us. We went in, we wiped out their nuclear. If we didn't take out that nuclear, we wouldn't have peace in the Middle East because the Arab countries could have never done that. They were very, very afraid of Iran.
Yeah.
They're not afraid of Iran anymore. Those beautiful B-2 bombers went in and they hit their target, every single bomb, and obliterated it. And within 1 month, they were going to have a nuclear weapon. Yeah. That was a big threat. They're not going to have it anymore.
But if we obliterate it, what's the deal about? I mean, if there's no more, are they trying to restart the nuclear program?
Well, I heard that they are, and if they do, and I let them know, if they do, we're going to send them right back and do their job again.
So your understanding is they tried to restart it, and that's why you're threatening force?
They tried to go back to the site. They weren't even able to get near it. There was total obliteration. But they were thinking about starting a new site in a different part of the country. We found out about it. I said, you do that, we're going to do very bad things to you.
Does he know what he's talking about?
I don't know. That's always a fair question, I think, with Trump. But I mean, if you take him at his word there, that we went in and those B-2 strikes were successful, you obliterated the program, even, if that's true, you believe that part of it, then even if Iran is going to go back to those sites and try to restart it, they're going to go to another site and try to recreate it again. You're talking about a years-long process to get back to where they were in terms of enrichment capabilities. And even the question of, were they a month away or not, I think that all of that's debatable. But if you take the president at his word there, that the B-2 strikes were successful, I think then you still have to ask yourself, what right now is the national security threat that Iran poses to the United States of America?
Well, the answer to that is none. Everybody that comes on this show has articulated that. If Marco Rubio were standing next to you, probably in the first sentence, it would be, well, we have to protect our ally Israel. Of course, Israel is not an ally in the formal sense. It's an ally in the economic sense because of the influence that its acolytes in the United States have over the American government. What do these things cost? What did it? I don't know if you're able to tell us. You're one of the country's foremost authorities on waste. What did it cost to kidnap Maduro?
Yeah, it's a good question, and what you're counting and all those costs. Because if you go with a low number, you say you're just talking about the gas, getting to and from this.
No, they had 150 helicopters and between 16 and 25 ships at sea.
Right. So everyone, say, take for example the F-35. We talked about the F-35. Every flight hour that the F-35 is in the air, it costs taxpayers around $30,000 for that aircraft to fly. And so, different aircrafts have different costs per flight hours, but that's the range that we're talking about. And so, ships, they're far more expensive to that. Every time a ship is at sail, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars while they're moving. And the cost of those ships and all of that equipment itself to begin with, if you add all that up, all the personnel that we had in the Caribbean surrounding this strike, you're talking billions and billions of taxpayer dollars to kidnap one person who may or may not have been associated with the drug trade. So, for taxpayers out there, you got to ask yourselves, is that what we want our tax dollars going for? And not some of the things that we might need to put food on the table for working families.
Do you know what, this is an unfair question, but let's kind of, what Trump means when he says we have an armada in the sea off the coast of Iran? I mean, how many ships are we talking about, and what does that cost? Or is that just unknowable because he just used a term that's not easily definable other than an accumulation of a lot of ships, armada?
No clue what he means by armada, but I can tell you we have a carrier strike group there, and so that includes, of course, the aircraft carrier itself. It includes all the aircraft that are on that aircraft carrier, and it also includes sometimes over a dozen support ships and other support vessels destroyers, amphibious ships, all kinds of smaller ships that offer additional support to it. So again, you're talking about that presence there. You're talking about tens of billions of dollars of military equipment that's there to face a country in Iran that doesn't spend that much money on its entire military in a given year. So the military overmatch is just extraordinary. And it's frankly, I will say this: it is nice that the U.S. has the ability to project that power. We just hope that the U.S. can be better stewards of when it uses that power. Because what we saw, when we struck Iran before, everybody likes to talk about how the strikes were successful. We hit the targets, decimated the nuclear program. What they don't like to talk about is what happened next when Iran started launching volleys into Israel. The U.S. steps in to help Israel intercept those missiles. In just a few days' time, the U.S. ran dangerously low on missile interceptors, to the point that you had some analysts saying, man, if we did have an actual hot war break out against some country that was actually a threat to the U.S., we wouldn't have the missile interceptors to fight that war. So whenever you join a conflict like this, even if you're the biggest, baddest military on the planet, there's a cost to be paid, and the cost is the readiness of that military.
How, I know you're an expert in the American military. Do you know how ready the Iranian military is? I mean, press reports never denied and even leaked out of the White House were that Netanyahu asked Trump, begged Trump to stop the war in June because Israel was taking such a beating. The Iranians have said this time we won't stop. Can Iran destroy Israel?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, that would be well beyond Iran's capabilities there. But I think it does, it does beg a question. I think like that should at least be part of the calculus for Israel going into this. If all that is true and Netanyahu was begging for a stoppage, then why provocate again? Why go back there? Iran's not coming out and launching. Iran has launched no strike on Israel since that time. Since we brokered this, Israel does not appear to be under direct attack by Iran now. So, if Netanyahu's worried about that, then maybe try to tone down tensions. Maybe pursue diplomacy first rather than just going first thing to bombing and an outright kinetic warfare.
Well, now you sound exactly like Professor Basovich, who has been very critical of American government for shooting first and talking later, or not even talking at all. I mean, this is not a political show. During the Biden years, there was no diplomacy with Russia and very, very little diplomacy with Iran. I don't know what Trump will do. Probably whatever Netanyahu asks him to do, because Trump's Zionist donors in the United States will put a lot of pressure on him to do what Netanyahu wants. What would happen to the Pentagon if the military budget were cut in half? If it was $750 billion instead of $1.5 trillion?
Judge, I'll raise you. Let's go to $500 billion.
Excellent.
And it's not even my idea. This was some of the most fascinating news in the past week that Palmer Luckey came out of it. If Palmer Luckey rings a bell to your viewers, this is the guy who founded the big defense tech firm Anduril. Previously invented Oculus. So, if you're in the virtual reality world, he's the guy you got to thank for it. He's one of these Silicon Valley's one of these tech geniuses. And so Palmer Luckey came out less than a week ago in an interview on CNBC. And he said he laid out bare all of the problems of the military industrial complex. A lot of the stuff we talk about in the $1 trillion war machine, laid out exactly why it's inefficient and how the U.S. could defend itself for a lot better. And he said directly that he thinks you could defend the country. You don't need to add a $500 billion. He thought you could defend the country effectively for half the price, for $500 billion, if you were buying the right things and stopped wasting so much money on these Cold War weapon systems that are long overdue, overpriced, and underperforming. And so, don't take it from me. when I say we can cut the Pentagon budget. This is literally the founder of one of the biggest, if not the biggest, defense tech firms saying you can slash the Pentagon's budget in half.
And instead of a person like that running the Defense Department, we have a cheerleader who wants to kill people.
Right. This is what Judge, I couldn't agree more. This is what I fundamentally just don't understand about Pete Hegseth. Is that, on one hand, you've got a guy just, got this macho, the warrior ethos, rah, rah, rah. He's cheering on AI and, moving the Pentagon towards this defense tech space, which on its surface sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's be leaner, faster. Let's use these technologies, which we're really good at. But on the flip side, we're seemingly not getting any of the efficiencies that make the tech sector what it is. Silicon Valley adopts technology and they save a lot of money. They save a lot of jobs. They get the tech to do the jobs that, people used to do. At the Pentagon, we're seeing just the opposite happening right now. You're seeing this rash to adopt AI at the Pentagon, and yet the Pentagon keeps adding more and more people to the bureaucracy. Current plans, Judge, I hate to ruin this for your listeners, but current plans are, the Pentagon's already the largest bureaucracy in the world, mind you, and they're planning to add 30,000 more people into an already ginormous bureaucracy. It's just shameful the amount of money we're wasting. Wow.
Ben Freeman, a pleasure, my dear friend. Chris, can you put the full screen up of the book? There it is, The $1 Trillion War Machine, How Runaway Military Spending Drives America into Foreign Wars and Bankrupts Us at Home. Those of you new to Ben Freeman should know that this is the standard work in the United States on the excess of military spending. And if you want to know about military spending, this is the book to read, and it is readable. Ben, thank you very much. If you see Professor Basevich, give him a hug from one of his biggest fans, and I hope you'll come back and join us again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. All the best. Coming up tomorrow, Tuesday, another Freeman. At 8 in the morning, Ambassador Chaz Freeman. At 9 in the morning, we're not sure if he's in Tehran or Mexico, but professor at the University of Tehran, my dear friend, Mohammed Morandi. At 2 in the afternoon, Aaron Mate. At 3 in the afternoon, Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski. It's the hour of colonels. At 3:45 tomorrow afternoon, Colonel Douglas McGregor. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.